Hilchis Tumas Ochlin, Perek Chamishi. Here the Rambam will start discussing the dinim of Yodis Ochlin and a Shemer of Ochlin. Now an Ochel is Mekabel Tumah. An Ochel is a food that's Mekabel Tumah. Now there's a din of a Yad Ochel. The Yad Ochel means the handle of the Ochel, even though it's not an Ochel itself. For example, the stem, which the fruit hangs from the tree from. Then when you take it off, so you hold the fruit with the stem. You hold the fruit with the stem. So Memela, so as a din of a Yad to the Ochel. Now through this Yad, if Tumah touches the Yad, so then the Tumah is transmitted to the food. And if the food is Tameh, and then another food touches the Yad, so that the Tumah of the fruit could be transmitted through the Yad. That's like mitamin mistamin through the Yad. It receives the Tumah through the Yad, and it transmits the Tumah to the Yad. But on the other hand, the Yad, the din is that in order for food to transmit Tumah, it has to be a share of a kibetza. The Yad is not mitzaref to the share of the betza. The Yad is not food, so therefore the Yad could be used to receive the Tumah for the food, transmit the Tumah from the food, but on the other hand, it won't be mitzaref to the share of a kibetza that the food has to have in order to transmit Tumah. To transmit Tumah. Now there's a din called a shemer. A shemer, for example, is the peel of the fruit. So the peel of the fruit preserves the fruit. So that peel also receives the tumah for the fruit and transmits the tumah from the fruit. But over here, this shemer is also mitzdarif to the shear of the beitza. So in other words, if you have, for example, a fruit that together with the peel is the shear of a kibetza, so then this fruit could transmit tumah. That's this din that we'll learn. Now, what's called a yad and what's called a shemer, so that the Rambam is going to discuss in this perek. In next perek a little bit. Perek Chamishi. Yodis Ochlin, what's Yodis Ochlin? Hein ha'etzim harakim, hasmuchim la'echel knows the stems, sha'echel nitla b'hem ha'olam, with the fruit hangs from the tree with, k'mei uktzeoteinim, or v'hagasim, uktzas ha'eshkel, notice the stem of a fig, of a pear, or the edge of a cluster of grapes. You have grapes, so the grapes are hanging on the eshkel, on the cluster of grapes, and then there's a something sticking out, which you hold that cluster. So that part that's sticking out of the cluster of grape, that's called the yad. V'chein hagarinim. Hagarinim pashtus means pits. The hagarinim are the pits, ukiyetziben, midvarim she'echel tzarech lahem. Now over here, the shaylos l'chur, if it's the varim she'echel tzarech lahem, should have a din of a shemer. Vice too, the Rambam brings from the Farish Yisod that through the pits, if we wouldn't have the pits, it would be very soft and it would be hard to hold it. Now through the pits, you're able to hold it because it's a certain firmness, and therefore it has a din of a yad. It's a little bit not so glottic, but I'll call upon him. The Rambam is saying, V'chein hagarinim u'kiyetzibem midvarim she'echel tzarech lahem. So Memela, so that also has a din of a yad, b'pashtus. Then v'shemri, that's talking about yodis Ochlin. And v'shemri Ochlin, what about what's shemri Ochlin? Hein haklipa al ha'ochel shehi shimrasi. The klipa, the shell which is on the food, which makes sure that the food doesn't decay, doesn't rot. So that's called the shemer. V'chein kol ki'etzim. So there's a musa called yodis. That's the etzim arakim, which the food is nitlaban, and then there's a musa called shemrim. That's like the peels, which make sure that the food remains, it's preserved and it doesn't decay. Halacha base, kol shehu yad ve'enu shemer. If it's a yad but it's not a shemer, so then is mistame umitame v'lei mitzdaref. It receives tumah and it transmits tumah, but it's lei mitzdaref. It's not mitzdaref to the share of a kabetza. V'chol shehu shemer, but if it's a shemer, avol b'she'ena yad, it's not really dealing as a handle. It's not functioning as a handle, but it's a shemer. So then mitame umistame umitzdaref. V'chol she'ena shemer v'lei yad, even though it's attached, is eine mistame v'lei mitame v'ein tzorech lemer she'ena mitzdaref. The Rambam teaches us ketzad mitame umitame v'eina mitzdaref. Means that shemnoga tumah biyad is nitma ha'echel hatoliboy. And that's the taich mitame. That's how the Rambam is teaching mitame. Mitame means it causes tumah for the eichel to which it's attached. The naga tumah ba'eichel, and if tumah was naga ba'eichel, so then nitma hayad, so the yad becomes tumah to the extent that it could transmit tumah. That's taich mistame. Mistame means it becomes tumah. Not like you could have touched mistami means it causes that the food to become tummy, and mitami means it causes something else to become tummy. The Rambam is touching differently. The Rambam is touching mitami means it's being mitami the food. So in other words, when the tumah touches the yad, so then through that it's mitami the food, and mistami means it becomes tummy itself in order to be able to transmit tumah. Nochmal, ketzad mitami mitame mitame ve'enim mitzaref. Imnaga tumah biyad is nitmo eichel, and that's a taich mistami nitmo eichel atoli be v'imnaga tumah be'eichel, and that is nitmo. That's called mitami rather. I'm sorry. Naga tumah biyad nitmo eichel atoli be. That's mitame. It was mitame the eichel atoli be. The naga tumah be'eichel is nitmo yad, and that's called mistami. And then, however, ve'ein hayad mitzarefes ha'eichel Lashlimi lekabetza lekachatzi pras. Sai benegir the shir of a kabetza which benegir negia, and sai benegir the shir of a chatzi pras that someone's oichel a chatzi pras of eichel tmeim, so he becomes tummy. So it's not mistarf. The eichel is not mistarf. However, avol noy shemer, but if it was a shemer, so then there is a mistarf lekabetza lekachatzi pras. So that's the chiluk. There's a musa called a yad and a musa called a shemer. A yad causes mitame or mistame, but on the other end, it's not mitzaref. And a shemer, the sai, it transmits the tumah, and sai, it causes the tumah on the oichel, and sai, it brings the tumah on something else. But on the other hand, it's not mitzaref to the shir of kachatzipras, or kashir of a beitza. Halacha gimel, kshem shiyad l'tumah, kach yad lehechsher. So just like this yad could cause to be makabel tumah for the oichel, and also the yad could cause to transmit tumah from the eichel to other foods. So in the same way, this yad is also benegeh hechsher, which means shem huchsher hayad. If there was water fell on the yad was huchsher. So memela huchsher kol eichel atolibay. So the eichel is also considered muchsher. In order for food to become muchsher, it has to have that mashke fell on it, beratzon. So if the mashke fell on the yad, it's killer that mashke fell on the eichel. V'yesh yad lepachas mikazayis, even if the food that he's eating is the food that the yad is a yad for is a pachas mikazayis, that's also a musa called a yad. And v'yesh shemer lepachas mikapul, and you can have a shemer for a pachas mikapul. There's even a very small amount of food, but nevertheless it's a shemer for that food. There's just like a svara to say there's so little food. There's a shemer on the food, or al der there's so little food. There's a yad on the food. So that's the chiddush. Yesh yad lepachas mikazayis, and yesh shemer lepachas mikapul. And the medayik that doesn't say that a yad can't be for a pachas mikapul. A yad could be for a pachas mikazayis, but it can't be for a pachas mikapul. And then the Rambam continues with shemer shechilkei einim etztaref from the eichel. On shemer, you can only have one shemer for an eichel. As we learn b'hamshich, you can only have one shemer for an eichel. So if you have a peel, for example, so the entire peel is on the food, so that peel is considered a shemer. Masha'inkin, if you divided the peel into two parts, or you divided the shemer into two parts, so then it's einim mitzdaref from eichel. So this shemer is not mitzdaref from eichel. Now there's a musik called sometimes when you divide the shemer and the shemer is no longer a shemer, because since it's already, whereas if the peel is already open, for example, so it's not really preserving the food, because the peel it's going to rot because part of the peel is off. Masha'inkin over here, the problem is because it's two shemerim. Shemer shechul keinim etztaref, because you can only have one shemer and not two shemer. Halacha dalet. Now uminayim l'shemri eichel shem mistam ma'eichel shem mechubarim behem. So this din that we just said that a shemer, the shemer becomes tummy together with the eichel when it's mechubar with the eichel. Where do we know this from? Shenamar al kol zera zeiru asher yizereah. That's the pasuk that's speaking about Tumas Ochlin. It mentions over there Tumas Ochlin, benegea that v'chiyipol ma'im al zera and al kol zera zeiru asher yizereah. So we learn out kederach shebnei adam mitzil zriya. Since it says zera zeiru asher yizereah, we're talking about the normal way a seed is taken out to plant, which is chitim. It says here b'seireim, other ageres b'klipeyim, chitim b'klipeyim, useirim b'klipeyim, badashim b'klipeyim. So in other words, it's mekabel tumah as it is, which is with the shemer on top of it, because normally it has the klip on top of it. And v'hu adin l'shar shemer. So that pasuk where it says azer zerua asher yizereah, we learn out that it's mekabel tumah with the klipa. Uminayim liyodis eichel shem estamis umetamis kshem mechubarim imo eichel. Shenemar tomi hu lachem. So we learn out lechol shebetzarchechem, everything that the food needs, including the yad. So from there we learn out that it's makabel tumah through the yad. And be'emes is brought down in the Gemara in Chulin that since there's two psukim. One pasuk tomi hu lachem lechol shebetzarchechem, and that's koil yodis. And be'emes shemrim are also nichol on that. In other words, once we establish that the yad is metame or mistame, it's understandable that the shemer is also, even if it's not a yad, is also metame or mistame or mitzdaref. So what do we need? The extra pasuk of al kolzer ziru asher yuzareya. So for that we learn out that not only is metame or mistame, but it's also mitzdaref. Nochamol. By yodis the din is only it's mistame or metame, but it's not mitzdaref. Benegei shemer, there's a din that it's also mitzdaref. Why? Because the pasuk that teaches us by yodis that it's metame or mistame, the Gemara says that we understand from there also shemer. So Mele, we don't really need another pasuk for shemer. So why do we have another pasuk? We have the pasuk kol zera ziru asher yizareya. So from there we learn out a din by shemer. So al karchach we have to say by shemer is more than yodis. What's more by yodis, the by shemer is also mitzdaref. Halacha vov. Haboitzer legas, someone he's harvesting grapes and he wants to go ahead and press those grapes, is ein yodis. So the stems of the grapes that are sticking out from the clusters don't have a din of yad. Why? Shari ein litzerev b'yad. He has no need in the yad. Normally when a person wants to eat it, so he wants to have this cluster and he wants to have something to hold the cluster. Mashenkin over here is interested in pressing it. So he has no need for the yad nader abim, neshametz samashka. This cluster is actually absorbing liquid. In other words, any liquid that comes out of the grapes that's absorbed in the cluster is a chsar, not a maila. So maila. So therefore, the stems of these grapes are not really considered a yad. Halacha vav hakoitzer l'sichoch. Person is cutting, is harvesting, is taking hay, and he wants to use it for schach. Is also, even though in this hay there could be there's grains of wheat, but in liyadas the hay doesn't have a din of a yad to the wheat. Sharein nitzedek liyad. In other words, a fakert, he's not really interested in the wheat. He's interested in something which is not food. He's interested in the food is not really a schach, because it's makabel tumah. What schach is really the pselis gave to the yakif. Now in this pselis is mu'ura food. So memela, if it's bottled, so since the ikar is the pselis and not the food, so memela can be used as schach. But you can't look at the pselis as being bottled for the food, because fakert, you're not interested in the food, you're interested in the pselis. And memela, it doesn't have a din of yad. It's not so clear in the lashon, but l'chura that's the pshat. Haketzel l'sichoch en liyodis, shari eni tzarech liyad. He doesn't need this to be a yad for the food, because he's not interested in the food. Halacha ches, kol yodis o eichel, shebosison bagein te'erin. Because if you have a yad of an eichel, and the eichel is still connected to the yad, but then you went ahead and you crushed them. You made a pile out of it, and you crushed them, and then you're eventually going to separate them. So right now, really, you're not interested. In other words, normally you have a yad, you want to eat it with the yad. But over here, you went ahead and you crushed it, and you're going to be separating it. So even though right now they're still partially connected, but nevertheless, since your intent, and you obviously did something already, your intent is to crush, to separate the yad from the food. You're going to make disha, you're going to thresh it. So memela, so therefore it's teher in the yad store. Now psiga shel eshkel sherikna. A psiga is, again, you have a cluster of grapes, and now the cluster works that you have like the larger stem that goes down through the cluster, and then you have little clusters that are coming out of this larger stem. So a psiga shel eshkel is like a small cluster that's attached to a larger stem. Psigo shel eshkel shirikna, and it's completely empty, and there's that little cluster, I'm not sure to call it, a little bunch of grapes that you completely emptied out is tahira, because that part is not necessary already. There's no grapes hanging on it. However, so therefore it's tahira. The im nishtayir b'gargerach, but if there's only just one grape that's left on this little cluster, is areza yad, garger. So this psiga becomes the yad for that garger. Even though l'chura originally psiga had many grapes on it, now there's only one left. But lepel, since there's one left, so the psiga still remains a yad for that grape. And umekabel is tuma, so it's mekabel tuma. It's mekabel tuma. All these dinim of mitame or mistame. V'chein sharvet tomorrow, a shoot of a palm tree which has dates. Shirikne, which no longer is this. You took away all the dates. Is Torah. Now shir beitmor achas again is tummy. Again you have a cluster of dates, and if you left over one date, so memela this whole sharvet becomes the yad for that one tomorrow, even though originally you had a lot of tomorrow. But now, even as long as there's one tomorrow left, it's still considered a yad. The chen sharvet kitnias shirikna. In other words, you have kitnias, which is peas or beans that you have like a pot, and mainly you have a number of kitnias in it, and lepel, if you took them all out, so then it's Torah. So in other words, all you have is the sholach, you only have the peel. Mashein kein shir begar gerechad, if there's still one of those beans in that sharvet, in that shoot of the kitnias, is then mekabel tumas. So the kudas advarim is that you can have a yad which was originally a yad for many things, and now for many pieces of food, and now most of those pieces of food are gone. There's only one piece of food left. So then it's no longer. So it's still a yad. Masha'inkin, if there's if the food is not there anymore, so then it's Torah. So in other words, even though originally it was mekabel tumah together with the food, but now that it's only it's left without the food, so it doesn't have a din of a yad. Mamela it's Torah. Halacha yud le'elam en shemer al gabi shemer. There's no mitzias of two shemer. El shemer echad bulvad asamach le'echel hu anech shavimi. So if you have, for example, a peel, and then you have an outside peel over the inside peel, so the inside peel has a din of a shemer, but the outside peel doesn't have a din of a shemer. Halacha yud aleph. Shalish klipes bebotzel. An onion has three peels. The pnimis, the inner peel, ben shleima ben kedurim mistarefes, whether it's complete or it has a hole in it, it's mistarefes, because be'emes is not a peel. Even though it looks a little like a peel, but in reality it's also part of the food. It's an edible item, and since it's an edible item, so even if it's not acting as a shemer, but nevertheless it's mistarefes because it's eichel. Now emtsois, the middle peel. So then it depends. Shleima mitzarefes. If it's complete, and then it's acting as a shemer, so then it's mitzarefes. However, kedura, if it has a hole in it, there's ain't a mitzarefes, because then it's not going to be a shemer. It's going to be mitzarefes as din shemer, but it's only if it's acting as a shemer. But if it has a hole in it, it's ain't a mitzarefes. Abachitzena, the outer peel, ben kach teira, even if it's complete, because lepel, there's the inner peel. In other words, if you have the outer peel, which is complete, but there's the inner peel. So memela, so therefore you don't need it. There's no din of a shemer l'shemer. So if there's no din of a shemer l'shemer, so the chitzein is never mistarefes. Halacha yud beis. Kol haklipin mistames or mistames or mitztarefes mipnei shein shemer. So the klipin are mitztaref. They're mitame or mitztamer. They're mitame and mistame al shemer. But however, when they're not a shemer, in other words, if they're klipin themselves, so the chura they're not a shemer, so at that point they no longer have a din of tumah. In other words, the din of tumah is only because they're a shemer. While they're a shemer, so they're mitames or mistames or mitztarfes. Masha'inkin l'chura, once they become shemer, so bepashtos they don't longer have the din of tumah of a shemer. However, so as a klipe, now there's certain klipes which are be'etzim food, certain klipes which could only be food. If you want it to be food, that's the dinam. There's different madregas and klipim when they're not a shemer. There's while they're a shemer, so they're a shemer. So mitamim, mistamim, mitztarpe. Now, what about when they're not a shemer? Is klipi pulin v'tirmusim? Of beans or tirmusim is also a different type of bean. Is zarkon? Once you throw it away, is eina mistamis, means you mesir das. You have no intent that it should be oichel. However, konsul oichlin, if you put it together for oichel, even though it no longer has the beans in it, is mistamen because it has it in a veichel. The imnisher b'meichel, but if there's food left in there, so then they're still acting as shemer. So then benkach or benkach mistamen. So no, there's a mitzvah of these klipin. While they're a shemer, they're for sure mistamen. Mitamim mistamen mitzdarif. Masha'inkim, when they're no longer food in it, so it depends. So b'negea pulin turmusim, it depends on your das. Zarkam, they lose their din eichel, and konsum, they have a din eichel. Now klipim malafafei. The peels of a cucumber is afal pi she'ein behem mitechal amlafen. It's only the peel. There's only the outside of the cucumber. Is nevertheless mistamis tumas ochlin because it has a din of a food. Whether you threw it away, you didn't throw it away. Either way, lepel the klipim lafen has a din of a food. Haseirim, barley, bisman shein yeveshim, while they're dry, is klipos and mitzarefes imoyim because the klipa has a din of a shemer. Ubisman shein lachim, but when they're moist, is ein mitzarfen. They're not mitzarfen. It's not so clear what's pshat over here, but vice to is that it doesn't have a din of an eichel. That's what the Rambam brings. That not only it's not mitzaref. The Lashon Rambam is kilo like be'atzim the seira when it's moist is makabel tuma. It's just that a mitzaref the peel is not mitzaref. He brings that lepel the seira when they're moist they're michael behema. They're not eaten by people. Mela since they're michael behema, so they're not makabel tuma. It's not the Pashtus Lashon Rambam. Pashtus Lashon Rambam is that they're not mitzaref to the seira. The seira itself are makabel tuma. But I'll call upon him nachamol bezman shein lachim ein mitzaref. But when we're talking about wheat, ben lachem and yevesha is kliposa mitzaref. As the klipa is mitzaref to the food, But the klipa on itself is taka doesn't have it in a food. Halacha yud gimel kol hagarinim mistames umetames v'lei mitzarfes. Generally, garinim are mekabel tuma and they transmit tuma. Aber v'lei mitzarfes they're not really they don't add to the shir. They don't add to the shir because we learned before that the Rambam called garinim as a yat. He called the garinim a yat. Chutz mi garinos haretiv. The garinos haretiv they have a din of a shemer. The garinos haretiv, retiv means a fresh date. The garinos of a fresh date, so they're being shemer because if you take out the pit from a fresh date, so the whole date will pour out. So therefore, the garina is serving not only as a yad but also as a shemer. Aval shel tmora yevesha, but when we're talking about a dry date, so then eina mitzarefes is nachamol. Normally the pits have a din of yadis, the Rambam said, and therefore the metamis or mistamis of lein mitzarefes, as opposed to a pit of a fresh date, which has a din of a shemer. Mashenke, the pit of a dry date has a din of a yad. Now hachoisel sha'al hagarina shel reitiv. In other words, we're talking about like an outer coating, like a little peel over the date, which is outside of a fresh date. That's taka ein mitzaref. That's fakert. So in other words, before we said a pit of a fresh date is mitzaref, and of a dry date it's not mitzaref. Masha'enkim b'negeh, that outer coating is fakert. Achesu shel hagarina shel reitiv. The outer coating, which is on this garina shel reitiv, is ein mitzaref. It's not mitzaref. However, shal garina sayevesha, the coating which is on a dry date, so that's mitzaref, and they should David be'echel, since it's David be'echel, so therefore it's nechshev ke'echel, it's considered ke'echel. So in the fresh date, it's not mamish considered David le'echel. It's easier separated. So therefore it's not mitzaref. It's not a shemer, it's not mitzaref. Masha'en kein b'negeya, when it's a dry date, so then it becomes David le'echel. When it's David le'echel, so it's like part of the echel, so it's mitzaref. Now, halacha tezvav, garina shoreitiv shiyatsa miktzasa. Reitiv we said is a fresh date. So you have, now this garina shoreitiv we said is mitzaref. Now what happens if part of the pit came out of the date? It's called shekineged eichel, the part of the pit which is inside the date, which is kineged eichel mitzaref. V'hayetz ain't mitzaref, but the part of the pit that's sticking out of the date is not mitzaref. V'chein etzem sheyesh alo basar. If you have an etzem which has basar on it, so there's the etzem. The question is it's a shemer on the basar. The etzem is a chashemer on the basar because the fact that the basar is on the etzem preserves the basar. Is kol shekeneged basar, the part of the etzem which is keneged basar is mitzaref. Mashenken, the part of the etzem which is not keneged basar is not mitzaref. Now hoyol of habasar mitzadechat. So if the basar went around the entire etzem, so the entire etzem is mitzaref to the basar. However, if the basar was only on one side of the etzem, is eini mitzaref mimenu. The only thing that's mitzaref to the basar is elo etzem shetachas habasar at chalal etzem. So in other words, there's the etzem and there's the hollow part inside the etzem. So until the hollow part, so to speak, you're almost taking the etzem and breaking it in half. So the half of the etzem, which is towards the basar, so that part of the etzem is takim mitzaref to the basar. But the part of the etzem which is not towards the basar, that part of the etzem is not mitzaref to the basar. That's talking about if the etzem has a cholol. If the etzem doesn't have a cholol, it's a solid bone. So then reine se ki'ilu ke'oivi ha'ezev. So notice how much of the etzem are you mitzaref to the basar, the amount of the thickness of an ezev, which is fast in the stomach, not so thick. There's a thin layer of the etzem is mitzaref to the basar. Ushara etzem ein mitzaref. Shohat somis lebasar kishemer nechshum. Atzomis is considered a shamer, but the shaila is how much of the etzem is considered a shamer. So the part of the etzem, so again, if the basar surrounds the entire etzem, so the entire etzem which is connected to basar is considered a shamer. If the basar is only on one side of the etzem and the etzem is hollow, so the part of the etzem until the hollow part, that's considered the shamer lebasar. And if the etzem is not hollow, it's solid, so then you only take off a certain amount of the etzem. In other words, you slice the etzem, that the etzem should be like the thickness of an ezev, and that part is mitzdaref to the basar. Halacha tezayin kulyas shahaya aleh basar afilu kepul is greater as kula latuma. Kulyas is like a thigh bone, a bone that's closed from both sides, and it had a pasha lashon shahaya aleh basar. There was basar on top of the kulyas, even a minimal amount is gated as kula latuma. So the whole kulyas is mitzdaref latuma. Before we learned that it's only keneged abasar. Over here, as we're learning that it's gated as kula latuma. So I mean, you could tell maybe because it's a kulyas. But the Rambam brings from Tesis that the pshat over here is that kulyas shahaya le'abasar means that we're talking about the marrow which is in the kulyas. In other words, even there's a minimal amount of marrow in the kulyas, so the whole kulyas becomes mitzdaref to the basar which is in the kulyas, which is not really the way you would normally teach it when you're just reading the Rambam. The Rambam would sound like shahaya le'abasar, but that's how he's teaching. That the pshat is that haya le'abasar means in the kulyas, which is not so glatik pshat. I mean, that's what brings from Matesus. That's pshat in the Gemara. I mean, pshat in the Rambam over here, it's not so clear. Halacha Yud Zayin. Garine zeisum utmara. The peels, the pits rather, of olives or dates, is aval pisha shoken leichlem, even if you cook them, is ein mistam, it can't become a food. There's a pit of dates and olives can become a food. However, garine charuvim, this is the pits of boxer, is aval pisha konsul leichlem ein mistam. While they're not cooked, and you would just konsul leichlem, they're not mistam. However, shoken leichlem, if you cook them, is mistam. So the pits of zeisim and tmorim cooking won't help. Mashenkin charuvim stam, as he putting them together, also won't help. That won't, even though konsul leichlem doesn't have a din of an eichel. Mashenkin, if you cook it, does have a din of an eichel. Now here, the next three halachas, the Rambam is going to say, he's going to give three lists. Notice the first list is going to be ve'elu mistamin umitamin umitzdarfin, those things that are considered a shemer, and then the halacha chof is elu mistamin umitamin v'lei mitzdarfin. They don't have a din of a shemer, but they have a din of a yad. And then the halacha chof aleph is those things that don't have a din, not of a yad and not of a shemer. Halacha yutes ve'elu mistamin umitamin umitzdarfin. These are considered, so basically it means it's called, it's a shemer, because a shemer is mitamim, mistamim, mitzdaref. Shorshe hashum v'aptzolim v'akaplutes, bizman shein lachem. When you have the roots, shum is garlic, psolim is onions, and kaplut is also a type of onion. It bizman shein lachem, when they're still moist, so that's considered a shemer to the shum and the psolim and the kaplutis. V'ham pit mashalem, and the like little flour on top of it, bein lacha, bein yevesha, that's also considered a shemer. That part, the flour which is on top of these shum, psolim, kaplutas, is considered a shemer. V'ha'amut, shum mechuvin kineged ha'echel, there's a certain stem that comes out of it, and that's like, has the seeds of it. So that's, when it's straight and it's mechuvin kineged ha'echel, so that also is considered a shemer. And v'shorshe hachazrin v'hanofus, also different vegetables. So the roots of this chazrin and nofus, and v'sherish tznein godel, and the sherish of a radish, a large radish, is also mitzdaref. However, v'asiv shalei, the sieve, which is a certain growth that grows like a certain fiber type of growth around its name, that's Einim Mitzaref, because that's not a shamer. That's not a shamer. So I'll call upon, these are the shamer. The shamer are these sharoshim. V'shorshi haminta v'apega. Again, the shorosh, minta is mint. Pega is another type of vegetable. And v'shorshi yarkis soda v'yarkis gina she'okran l'shsolim. In other words, when you pulled out vegetables and your intent is to replant them. So you have these vegetables and you've pulled out the vegetables with its roots and you have an intent to plant them. So these roots are important. They're preserving the vegetables in order to be able to replant them. V'hashura shel shibelis v'alavushalo. There's the stem in which when you have a wheat, so there's the middle stem where the kernels are attached to. So that middle stem and the lavushalo, the outer layer which is covering those kernels of wheat, and v'ukse te'enim ugregris, and the uktzim pashtus means the stems of the figs, and the gregris is dried figs, v'haklosim v'charuvim, so the uktzim of te'enim, gregris, and klosim, charuvim, so all of these things have a din of a shemer. Earlier, the Rambam said, I'm not really sure, the Rambam earlier said that in the beginning of Perek Chamishi, when he spoke about Yodis, he gives an example, I'm not really sure. That's what over there he called them Yodis. And over here he's saying that they're mitzdarfim. So l'chura, ukse te'enim ugregris have a din of a shemer. I'm not sure how this Rambam stems with the other Rambam. But I'll call upon, here's a list that the Rambam is giving us of things that are mistamin, umitamin, umitzdarfim, because they all have a din of a shemer. Halacha chof, ve'elu mistamin, umitzdamin, v'lei mitzdarfim. In other words, they don't have a din of a shemer, these have a din of a yad. So therefore they're mistamin or mitamin, but on the other end, le mitzdarfin. Now, shorshi ashum v'aptzolim v'kaplutis, bizman shein yiveshim. In halacha yitas we learned that bizman shein lachim, so they have a din of a shemer. Masha'inkim bizman shein yiveshim, they don't have a din of a shemer, but they still have a din of a yad. Or v'ha'amud she'ein mechuvin k'neged eichel. Before we learned about the amud, which is mechuvin k'neged eichel. So then we say that it has a din of a shemer. Masha'inkim, when this amud is eine mechuvin k'neged eichel, so then it has a din of a yad. Or umloin shel shibolim, what's that? Vehein hasa'aris hashchoiris shebereish hashibelis shedemen k'mei maser. You have like ears on top of the stalk of wheat that looks like a saw, and it looks like a saw, knows it has ridges to it, and memela, these are sa'iris, which are called a yad. They're a yad to the shibelis, but on the other end they're not a shemer. And then v'uktzei ha'agasim v'akrustamalim v'aprishim bo'izradim. So before we spoke about the ukitz of the te'enim and the gregris and the klosim, the charuvim, so the Ram said that they have a din of a shemer. Masha'inkin uktzei ha'agasim v'akrustamalim. Agasim is like pears. Krustamalim are quinces. V'aprishim bo'izradim are all part of that family. So they are considered a yad. And the ukitz dalas hasamuch leichel, a tefach hasamuch leichel. The ukitz of a dalas, but that ukitz is already a shear. How big could that ukitz be? A tefach. A tefach hasamuch leichel. In other words, more than a tefach is not necessarily. So the part that extends more than a tefach doesn't have a din of a yad. And also the ukitz kundis, also a type of food, is also a tefach. V'chein yad haparkel. So the Rambam teaches what a parkel is. The yad haparkel is tefach mikan v'tefach mikan. Now what's a parkel? A parkel who has sorik, that's the vine. Shoeshkel is plizbe. So you have a cluster of grapes that are hanging on this parkel. So we'll soon see the cluster of grapes itself. In other words, the stalk which is holding the cluster of grapes, there's no shear. How big that stalk could be. But the vine, which is holding that stalk, so that could be, that would be the shear of a tefach on one side of the vine, and a tefach on another side of the vine, that would be considered a yad to the eshkel. That's what he's saying. V'chein yad aparkel, the yad of a parkel is tefach mikan v'tefach mikan. What's v'aparkel? A parkel who has sorig, that's the vine, she'eshkel is tluyim bei, which the eshkel is totally in it. And the yad of eshkel, but the yad of the eshkel itself is kosher. Now, uznava eshkol shirikne, what happens if you had a cluster of grapes, and then the bottom of the cluster of grapes, you emptied out, in other words, you took all the grapes off, so now you have something which you could really hold the cluster of grapes from the bottom. In other words, normally you'd hold it from the top, but now you have this nava eshkel, which really could be used to hold the cluster of grapes. So we say, over here there's a shir, there's nava eshkel shirikne, and also the yad hamachbit shel tomorrow, which the Ram will soon teach what that means. So both of them is arbot tvachim. Is nava eshkel shirikne is very clear. You have a cluster of grapes, and you took the grapes off the bottom of it, so now you have that part of it, which, so we say, 4 tvachim could be used as a yad for the eshkel. Now, what's this yad hamachbit shel tomorrow? So he teaches us say, and the yad hamachbit shel tomorrow is arbot tvachim. Also arbot tvachim. So size nava eshkel shirikne. Inside yad hamachbet shel tomorrow is arbot tvachim. Now what is this? Machbed is ha'etz ha'odem shar sharvitim tluyim bei. So there's like a red wood that's reddish, that comes out of the palm tree, that the sharvitim, which are the shoots, are totally from this eitz. And va'atmorim dvuk is b'sharvitim. So you have the shoots that are like, just like you have the cluster of grapes, so you have the grapes on the clusters. So al derezeh you have the sharvitim, which are holding the tamarim, and then you have the machbed, which are holding the sharvitim. So again, this machbed, in order for the machbed to be a yad, so the shear is 4 tvachim. Yad hamachbed shel tamara. So in other words, that a machbed shel tamara should be a yad for the tamarim which are hanging. So that's only if the 4 tvachim of the machbed could be considered a yad for the tamarim. Uknei shibelis, the con of the shibelis, no, there's a stem on which you have a stalk of wheat. So you have the upper part of the stalk where the kernels of wheat start growing, and then there's the con of the shibelis on the bottom, which the wheat is coming out of. So that's the size of shleisha tvachim. V'yad kol haniktzarim, and things that are cut. In other words, things that you don't pull out of the ground, but you rather cut it. So it's always shleisha tvachim. Abeshein darkeli katzer yadeim. Darkeli is something which is not normally cut, so then you pull it out of the ground. You don't cut it; you pull it out of the ground. So then yedei v'sharashem kol shein. Then the yad and the sheirish of it is always kol shein. In other words, there's no shear. So again, things that are normally cut. So you say you normally cut it, so there'll be like 3 tvachim extra. You know, there's the place where the oichel is, and then there's the stem which you're cutting towards the bottom. And mainly you could have 3 tvachim of stem, which are before, which are lower, with which that you could hold on to the shibelis, which contains the food. Masha'enkin, when you pull things out, so then there's no shear. That's what he's saying. V'shein darkeli katzers yedei v'sharashem kol elu. Is kol elu, all of these things that we mentioned in this halacha, is mistamin umitamin v'lei mistarfin. Mipnei shein yodus eichel. So we had a list in halacha yutes of those things which are called a shemer. That's mistamis umitamis umitzdarfin. And now we have a list in halacha chav of those things that are mistamis umitamis and v'lei mitzdarfis, because they have a din of a yad and not a shemer. Now halacha chav he says ve'elu lei mistamin v'lei mitamin v'lei mitzdarfin, which is shar kol uktzin. He mentioned uktzin which have a din of a shemer. He mentioned uktzin which have a din of a yad. And now he's saying other uktzin doesn't have a din not of a shemer and not of a yad. And also v'sharshe kilchi akruv, or v'chilfi tarden v'chilfi alefes. In other words, the shayrish, the roots of cabbage, and also tarden normally tarden beets, and v'chilfi alefes, lefes is gourds, and v'heino ikrim shenishru b'karka sheliktu akruv alefes v'chozu v'chlifu. In other words, you left the roots in the ground, and then it regrew. So those roots are not really considered a yad. They're certainly not a shemer, and they're not even a yad to the kruv and the lefes. If you happen to pull it out, so normally the seder is that you leave it in the ground. But if you happen to pull it out, so memele it doesn't have a din of a yad either. That's what he's saying. Ve'ina ikrim shenishuru bekarka ksheliktu akruv alefes v'chozu v'chlifu. So these things aren't considered a yad. V'chol hasharoshim. Shedarkam lihi gozes, the sharashim which normally you cut. So you don't pull out the shirashim. And lepeil shenekru ma'eichel, so they don't have a din of a yad. That's the rule. The rule is that those things that are normally pulled out with the food, so they have a din of a yad. But those things that are normally cut off, and memela the sherish is left in the ground, and you cut off the food from the ground, that doesn't have a din of a shemer, it doesn't even have a din of a yad. Now, hapitma shorimen, the pitma of the rimen, this is like l'chura, this halacha seems to be shalebim kemei, because the Ram gave l'chura a list. Over here he's talking about things that it doesn't even have a din of a yad. Now he's saying the pitma shorimen is mistarefes. There's the pitim, like a certain button which is on top of the rimen, is like, that's part of the rimain, is mistarefes, is considered part of the rimain. It's a shamer to the rimain. Hanetshele is like the flowers which are growing on top of this pitma, is Einim Mitzaref, is not Mitzaref. Vice versa, Yad it is, but it's Einim Mitzaref. That's L'chura the Pashtus. Halacha Chav Beis, Harimein v'avatiach shenimek mitzasi. You have a pomegranate or a melon, the part of it started rotting. Is Ein HaNisher, the part that's left over, is not a chibur le'isi shenimek, is not considered attached to the part that's rotting, because the part that's rotting is no longer food. Now, the Ein HaNisher min HaKlipper, what's left over from the Klippa, is not mitzaref, shari ein shmirasim yelis klum. Now, l'chura, nishma klipa, the Rambam teaches nishma from the Aruch HaShulchan, that nishma klipa means the part of the klipa which is on top of the rotten part. The part that's on top of the rotten part is not mitzaref because the shmiras ein yelis klum. L'chura, there would be a place to learn that the pshat is that even the part that's on the good part, you know, since when you have an entire food that has a clip on top of it and it's not rotting, so it's preserving the food. But if you have already a part of the food that's rotting, so even if you say the whole clip is whole, but lepel, the clip is already not functioning, so the clip doesn't have a din of a shema. That's how l'chura ein hanishur min haklipa. But al kopim, that's how he teaches that ein hanishur min haklipa means the part of the klipa which is on top of the rotting part. And then he says, "V'cheinim hoyish sholi mikan u'mikan." If you have a pomegranate or a melon, which is complete on two sides, in between there's two good parts to it, and in the middle there's a part that's already rotting. So the din is einach tzdadim chibur zelazeh. The two good sides aren't considered connected because since in the middle there's a part that's rotten, so therefore that part is not oichel. So therefore there's two pieces of oichel which are connected to a part that's not oichel, but they're not connected to each other. And the enkli posei mitzdarefes. So again, what's pshat enkli posei mitzdarefes? So again, he teaches enkli posei mitzdarefes goes on the part that's nimik. That's part that's nimik. Enkli posei mitzdarefes. L'chura the pasha, since it knows the inside it's rotting, but the outside is not rotting. So we say, but since this klipa is already a klipa on something which is partially nimik, so b'pashtos the klipa is not mitzdaref. Al kopon he teaches en klipas mitzdarefes, which means the klipa which is on the part that's nimik is not mitzdaref to the food because that klipa is on the part which is nimik. Okay. Ala yerokes, the alim of yerokes, the leaves of yerokes is yerukim if they're green, so they're mitzdaref because they are a shamer to the food. They're preserving the food. Aber levanim, if they're white, is einam mitzdarfim, shara einam klum, they're nothing. So even though they're nothing as far as they're not a shamer is concerned, but the lashon is einam mitzdarfim. So with pashtus, it has a din of a yad. A yad does have a din.